So today we are actually going to go back to basics here because I've helped a handful of agents with their offers in the past week. Of course, I encourage them, go ahead and take the draft that I send them, and I'm still working on the complete bullet point, lined out, red lined version of my own here. I'm not finished with it quite yet, but as soon as I get it done completely and point out all the boxes to check and everything like that, I'll send it to everybody. But I am noticing they're sending me a draft, and I encourage them to try it on their own based on a filled out example offer that I sent to them. But I oftentimes get it back and there are things missed and some things that are very important. So we're going to go over some basics today. So I'm still seeing that streets are not correct, not necessarily the name of the street, but is it a street? Is it a drive? Is it a lane? I see that agents are not putting in the county. You got to remember to put in the city and the county and the zip code and of course the APN. The APN can be found on the MLS. When you're looking at the MLS listing, the APN is going to be in the same area that it shows the bedroom count, bathroom count, square footage, lot size, all that stuff. You'll see assessor parcel number or parcel number. I just copy and paste that there so that I'm not trying to transcribe it over and miss a number and mess up. Okay, so let me put this down a little bit. So I do a lot of not transcribing, but copying and pasting over from the MLS when I'm filling this out entirely. So what I'll do is, let me show you an example here. Okay, let's go in here into the MLS. Now, why do I copy and paste? Because there are quite a few things that you need to put on the offer sheet, even on page 1, that if you get something wrong, we're going to have to amend it. And the more amendments that we have, obviously those are items that are going to, hold on real quick, they're going to kind of start chipping away at the client's confidence that there are so many errors being made that we're constantly having to correct things. So let's say, for example, let's get going there. On the RPA itself, let me go back to this real quick and show you. On the RPA itself, of course, we have to put the assessor parcel number. Okay. Of course, the address, the agent's brokerage on the other side, whatever the opposite side of you is, and so if you're basically writing an offer, you need to put the brokerage of the listing side and the listing agent on the other side and their DRE numbers here. So there's some important information you want to get right, and you should get right. All you have to do is, for example, the parcel number. Let me go back here. There we go. The parcel number is right here. So all I do is highlight that, copy, boom, paste it over to my RPA. Same thing with the brokerage. You just scroll down to the bottom and you look at what brokerage they're with, highlight it, copy, boom, paste it over. Name, copy, paste it. DRE numbers, copy, paste them over. Just bring them right over just to make sure that you're getting everything correctly. Because remember, these DRE numbers, an escrow or our compliance, they check all this stuff. So if they catch something like that, they're going to come back to you and say the DRE number is wrong on the listing agent or the brokerage, or it's not there at all, and we need it corrected. That means we have to amend it. And if we have to amend something or do an addendum, that means both parties need to sign, and they start wondering, what is this for? And then it's pointed out, oh, the agent made an error. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to get pointed out as making errors. Okay, so brokerage, agent, DRE numbers, copy, paste, bring everything over. APN, copy, paste, bring everything over. I think my my laptop's freaking out again. There we go. I'm looking like the Matrix. Okay, another thing I'm seeing quite a bit. I helped 4 agents with offers this week, and 3 of the 4 did it correct. One.
¿Cómo es? Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Uh-oh.
Can you mute everyone? Frank, can you mute people?
No, de hecho yo lo quería viernes. El viernes yo quería ir a.
It's Miguel.
Okay. So 3 out of the 4 did it right. 1 didn't. 2-3 weeks back, had another 3 I helped write an offer with. 2 of them, 1 of them did it right, 2 didn't. So it's an ongoing thing. You need to check these boxes right here. You need to check. It might seem simple. Well, who cares? We already got their brokerage name. We've already got the agent's name, the DRE numbers or everything, but it's not official on who's representing who until you check a box. So if you are representing a buyer, you, under the buyer's brokerage firm, are going to put EXP and of course you, correct DRE numbers, but you check the box that you are representing the buyer. On the other side, check the box that they're representing the seller. If you are double ending it or dual agency, you can go ahead and check both buyer and seller. You can just check it on both of those. But we got to get these things right here from the beginning. And I know it seems like a menial thing, a tiny issue, whatever, but it becomes a bigger finger point later on. And it's brought to everyone's attention later on. And we don't want to be, be the one that's looked at as making errors in such a large transaction. Okay. I'm also seeing miscalculations of the loan amount. And the reason I go over these items so much is because these are the meat and potatoes. These are the things you got to get right, but oftentimes these are the things that agents sometimes miss or get wrong. Okay. So calculating this number right here, which is item E1, 3E1 on page 1 of the RPA, very, very important, because if you don't get this number right, it's going to spiral things down here with your balances off. Okay. So how we get this number right here is by taking whatever price you're offering and times that times the amount of down payment that the buyer is bringing to the table. Everyone understand that? The amount of the down payment that the buyer is bringing to the table, you simply subtract that amount from the offer amount and you will get this amount. What this amount is right here on loan amount is this is how much the bank is giving to the purchase. The buyer is paying the balance of that. So in this case, if this buyer was putting 10% down of 500,000, 10% is 50,000. If you were to take 500,000 and subtract the 50,000, you are going to get 450,000. Now, if you know your buyer is putting 10% down and you do those numbers correctly, this will reinforce it on right here on the side. It will automatically tell you what percentage this number is right here. Okay, but you still want to spot check this and make sure you get it correct to the dollar. Absolutely correct. Because if you put, let's say 449,500, it's still going to show 90%. It just kind of rounds it off. So this number right here, you want to get it right. So what do? Let me increase this size right here. You're going to take the purchase price, right? Times whatever the percentage, whatever number you get there, you subtract it from the offer price. So once again, your offer price is 500,000. The lender says the buyer is putting 10% down. 10% of 500,000 is 50,000 right here. You subtract 50,000 from 500,000, you get 450. Now, if everything's done correctly, your numbers at the bottom will line up. That offer price is going to be correct. this number right here is not going to have a parentheses on it. If you get this number wrong up here, this will actually show a parentheses around it. And that's a clue that, hey, you're off somewhere here. Now, another thing is I've had agents ask me once again, hey, my buyer's asking about the initial deposit, about the escrow deposit. They're asking if they have to bring the down payment on top of that escrow deposit. The answer is no. This escrow deposit, which by the way, on average, when you write your offers, write it for at least 1%. One of the agents had a buyer and they wrote an offer for about $425 and they put their initial deposit as $1,000. I did mention to them, by doing that, you're sending a signal to the seller that you're not serious because this is at risk money. The agent says, I know. I tried to tell the buyer, I know you say, Frank, at least 1%. So they wrote the offer, they got a counter, and the listing agent actually came back saying they wanted 3%, let alone $1,000. So they wanted $12,000, $13,000 or so, not just 1,000. Okay. At least put the standard 1%. Okay. So this initial deposit is money that goes up front, but this initial deposit is part of the entire down payment. So once again, if the buyer's putting $50,000 down, 10% of 500,000, this 5,000 going in up front is part of the 50. So how much more does the buyer bring? Take the 50 minus 5, and you're going to get 45. So this is how you know all your numbers are lining up. You got your escrow amount in there, whatever that is what it is. At least 1% though, please. You calculated the correct loan amount here. All right. So if you take that escrow deposit and you calculate it, well, you don't necessarily have to calculate that. It's going to self-calculate it. But whatever your initial deposit is, subtract that from whatever the buyer's total down payment number is, and it's going to show down here as the balance of down payment. It's not in parentheses. This plus this equals the total amount of the buyer's down payment. The offer price down here is correct. We calculated this right. Everything's lined up. You shouldn't have any problems. Now, I had an agent ask me today also, shouldn't you put on item number E1, shouldn't you put some numbers in here, plug some numbers? For example, this not to exceed area right here, not to exceed and then a percentage. And also buyer to pay up to however many points. Well, here's the thing. A savvy listing agent that gets your offer, and if you put a percentage in there, they're probably going to counter it out. Anyone want to give it a shot on why a listing agent would counter out you putting in whatever you think the buyer's interest rate is going to be? Anyone want to take a shot at that? Anybody?
Buyer's interest rate? Did you say
What's
buyer's
that?
interest rate? Did you say buyer's interest rate?
Yes. Why would a listing agent say,
It could
no,
change at any
I don't want
moment
that. I don't want that in there.
because it's not locked in until later, until the loan paperwork, correct, Frank?
Okay, you're on the right track. Okay. It's not locked in, which means what?
It could increase
It could increase.
or decrease, but
Okay, now
let's say increase.
if your buyer, if you wrote the offer and you said the buyer's rate was going to be 5.85, buyer and seller sign this and it says not to exceed, and then you put 5.85, and then later on, when the lender gets the buyer's rate locked in on what their rate is actually going to be, and it ends up being 6.25, that may give the buyer a loophole way out of the transaction. Everyone understand that? If the seller agrees that the buyer's rate is not to exceed this, and then accepts the buyer, and then we find out later that the buyer's rate is going to be higher, that could be a possible escape loophole for the buyer. And listing agents, basically, our goal is to get the property sold and get the buyer to release their contingencies, basically release all of their ways out during the course of the transaction. And the listing agent's goal is to have the buyer release their contingencies, their ways out, to release their contingencies as soon as possible, so that eventually the buyer gets locked in and basically obligated to close the transaction, or possibly lose their initial deposit if they don't close the transaction. So you can put something in here. Some listing agents won't care. It'll get by them. It won't matter to them. Maybe it's their, non-concern or no, lack of experience. But a lot of the savvy agents are going to counter this out. And they're going to say something to the effect that the buyer has to accept. Let's put it in simple words. The buyer must accept whatever rate they get at the close of escrow. Whatever it is, they have to take it. That's not an excuse to withdraw. Everyone understand that? Any questions on that? All right. This is a little technique. I don't know if you want to call it a tactic, but there are agents that intentionally will put a lower rate here, knowing that the buyer's rate is higher, and they try to use it kind of like as a backup escape loophole. Make sense? All right. Also, I'm seeing boxes not being checked here if it's applicable for the type of financing that the buyer is getting. Now, if the buyer is getting a conventional loan, which usually is going to be, there are conventional loans as low as 3%. But if the buyer is getting anything other than a conventional loan, like an FHA, which is Federal Housing Administration, or a VA loan, which is the veterans loan, then leave it alone. If it's a conventional loan, it already is assumed here because it says conventional or. If it's something other than conventional, then go ahead and check the appropriate box. Other than conventional, the most common is going to be either FHA or VA. There's a seller financing. That gets really complicated. I'm not even going to go into it. Hardly anybody even dare go that direction. And other, there might be some other products out here, but it's mostly conventional, FHA, or VA. We got a hand up, Misty?
Yeah, Frank, I'm sorry. Can you go back? What did you say about sometimes agents put
Right
other
here,
yeah.
this is, they know that their buyer is going to get a 625, and they'll try and slip a lower number in here, like 585, knowing that the buyer's rate that they've discussed with the lender is going to be 6.25. So they know the buyer's rate is going to be higher than the number that they'll put in here sometimes, because they're trying to use that as a possible escape at the last minute clause. Because if buyer and seller sign this and we agree that the buyer's rate cannot exceed whatever number you put there, if the rate is officially higher, then the buyer's agent and the buyer can say, well, we said that it can't exceed higher than this amount, and it is exceeding it, so we want out.
Wow.
So me as a listing agent, I'm knocking that out every time. You plug any number in there, I don't care if it seems lower than it should be. I'm just taking it out.
Okay.
I'm not gonna, basically I learned over the years all the tactics, all the loopholes, all that stuff. And I know this is one of them right here. Now, some may look at it like, well, I always do that and it's never been a problem. Well, you just haven't had an agent on the other side prepared to counter your move if you are one of those agents that does it intentionally. Like a lot of listing agents will pay attention to every other contingency and be strict and firm on all these other things and completely not even think about the possibility of the buyer walking away because of that, because of this.
Okay. Thank you.
No worry. No worry. Okay, let me let some more folks in here. Okay, any questions on page 1 here? Nope. My apologies. Let me just take a look at something here. Okay. Okay. Going to page 2. So it's pretty common. It's the trend right now that buyers are asking for closing costs or credit up front. It's starting to slow down and lose traction because sellers were very, very concerned. They're still concerned right now because the rates are higher on the buy side, obviously, which has slowed greatly the buyer momentum. So things shifted quite a few months ago, and it leaned more toward being a buyer's market, meaning advantage buyer, meaning buyers a few months ago were asking for thousands of dollars up front and then having their home inspections and asking for more credit or repairs to be done after the fact. There's an agent that I worked with a while back, and between closing costs and repair credit, they probably got about $30,000 out of the seller. Now, remember, the credit's coming from the seller. That means immediate loss of profit from the seller. That's the seller's immediately losing profit by giving credit to the buyer. It's not something worked out within the loan. It's basically the seller not profiting whatever the buyer is asking for back credit-wise. That's slowing down a bit right now because that was at a time where sellers were still, I think, overpricing. They were overpricing. They were still feeling like we were in that momentous seller market that we had, and they didn't have a clue yet. They felt like they had nothing but complete advantage, and that wasn't the case. They were overpricing and finding that buyers were, they were clued into what's going on with the trend for asking for the money. So now I've seen this in the past 2-3 months. The sellers, listing agents got a clue, obviously, too, or maybe both of them have a clue and they understand that the market is what it is. But most properties out there are priced accordingly. Agents are putting a little more work in at comping and getting that number right because they have to, or else they're going to sit. And if they're sitting, they're not getting, any action. They're not getting any offers. They're probably going to have to do a price reduction, and that's going to make them vulnerable there also. Once the agent starts seeing the red arrows going down, that's when they start taking advantage of things. So I'd say majority of properties out there are being priced correctly or even just below market to attract a lot of traffic. So buyers going in and asking for thousands of dollars to be basically deducted from the seller's profit when it's already marked at a fair price. Sellers they're not as open to doing that right now. They're standing their ground a little more. Question, Nancy.
Question, yeah. So is this where you would put, for example, for the 2-1 buy down to buy the rate down? Is that where we would ask for the credit?
Yeah.
In this section?
Yeah, you could put.
And we would specify what it's for?
Now, some will just check the box here and put an amount, and it's going to show a percentage, but I like to spell it out clearly. What's it for?
Okay.
And you don't necessarily have to put it's for a 2-1 buy down. You could basically say it's toward the buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing cost.
Oh, is that what? Okay.
Yeah. That pretty much covers it. It can be okay to just plug in a number there, but I'm just trying to get specific here for something like that.
And 1% is a standard, for the 1 point?
No, right. Well, I mean, buyers were getting crazy. Buyers were asking for, 4%, 5%, 6%.
Wow.
Depending on the loan, you need to talk to the lender too. You can't just let your buyer take control and say, I want $30,000. And then you talk to the lender after the sale. Who knows? Back a few months ago, sellers were saying okay to it. Now they're not. You
Mhm.
know, you got to be reasonable. But after you get accepted, the lender may come back and say, hey, I just saw in the RPA here, you asked for 30,000, but with this particular loan, you're capped at 25. So how are you going to recoup that other 5,000? You know,
Yeah.
if there's a cap on what the lender says the maximum amount of credit from seller to buyer can be. Okay, so talk to the lender first before you ask for any kind of
Any
credit and find out
Okay.
what the max is. I mean, you can
Okay.
get creative and maybe the seller gives you 25,000 for credit up front, and then maybe, I don't know, you'd probably have to agree that we're going to have a professional home inspection. You want the seller to do some repairs, which might equal to the other 5,000. I don't know, you know.
Okay.
So,
I just
but
was
talk to the lender up front before you start stretching things out. I
Okay.
think those who are writing offers out there that say they were writing offers 5, 6, 7 months ago and asking for closing costs and getting it would see right now, sellers they're pushing back. You know, you ask for 30, they might come back and say, I'll give you 10. I'll give you 5, take it or leave it. You know, they're standing their ground because the thing is, like I said, they are pricing it correctly nowadays. When they weren't pricing correctly, they were gouging before, but they, you know, like everybody else has had to adjust to the market.
What's usually the standard you've seen of closing costs? Sorry if I missed it, like percentage wise you've seen. That seems like a fair game.
Well, to me, like when I'm preparing my buyers, I'm not the lender, but I want to put numbers in their head and I usually run it high. So I usually tell the buyers, talk to the lender, get more specifics on what your closing costs might be, but it's usually going to be about 2% of whatever the purchase price is. About 2%. If you ran it at 2%, it's probably more than likely going to be less than that. But remember, in our industry, you got to use psychology. So if you put the expectation that the buyer is going to have to bring more money to the table and then later on they bring less, they're happy. If you throw out numbers that are lower and then they have to bring even $100 more, oh, they're having a fit. They're having a fit. There's blood in the streets, whatever. So when I'm talking about how much they may have to bring or how much they may have to put, I'm going to run those numbers high. Okay. It's opposite with the sellers. With sellers, I'm not telling them, you know what, we could get 550. I might tell them, we're looking at mid fives. So I'll just reword it instead of saying a specific number, 550. I say mid fives, it could be 535, 540, 545, 550. It could be. But once I say that number 550 and we start getting offers and the highest one, or on average, they're around 540, 545, that extra 5,000, because you threw that number out there, psychologically, they can't let go. It's tough for them. Same thing, like I said, on the buyers. If you told them they only have to bring this much and they have to bring $1 more later, they're upset. But on average, closing costs are around 2%, but people are asking for more than that. You know, right now, buyers on average are asking for 3%, probably because the percentage of closing costs is likely more like 1.5 to 1.75%. And then the extra 1% to 1.25% they're using to buy down the rate. Okay. And as long as the lender says we can get up to 25,000 and the seller's giving 25,000, you can maneuver those monies toward the closing costs however you want, to buy the rate down, to just pay for the closing costs straight up, but to try to make use of all the money that you're getting. I think I'll have Bill didn't come in tonight, but maybe I'll have him talk about it next Monday on maneuvering those closing costs. Okay, some simple things also that I'm seeing the agents are missing, which is, just a couple of boxes to check. Usually you're going to provide a pre-approval to a seller listing agent. What's the difference between pre-qualification, pre-approval, fully underwritten pre-approval? I'm not going to go into deep detail, but pre-qualification could be numbers run that were translated to a lender just verbally. How much do you make a year? I make about this much. What's your credit like? My credit's around here. What do you think you're paying out bills wise? And then a lender can run some basic numbers and give you a pre-qualification just on some verbal. Pre-approval, a little more. Might have to send some bank statements, have the credit run, you know, give a W-2, whatever. Pre-approval, little more in-depth analysis of your finances. Fully underwritten, oh, that means that they're looking at your taxes for at least the past couple of years, several weeks, months back for pay stubs and bank statements. Are doing a deeper dive. They're basically getting the bigger, clearer picture of your qualification. But on average, a pre-approval is sufficient, because that means that you've actually handed over some financials, some paperwork to the lender, and have a roundabout idea what the buyer's buy power is. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I've had quite a few questions here as well about final verification of condition. We referred to this for many years as final walkthrough. Okay, final walkthrough. By the way, I just helped an agent with a transaction where the listing agent tried to hold the final walkthrough hostage from the buyer performing their absolute right to do their final verification in trade for releasing all the buyer's contingencies. That, unless it's put somewhere in a counter and clearly stated as that is not something that you can deny a buyer. The listing agent is not supposed to deny the buyer to do their final walkthrough within at least 5 days prior to the close of escrow. Now, what is the final walkthrough? You're basically going in to make sure that things are as you last saw them. And usually it's going to be your inspection may have been the last time you saw it. So let's say a few days in, you had your inspection, you were there for a couple of 2 or 3 hours and got a closer look at the property while your inspector is going around and taking a much deeper look into things. What are you looking for? You're looking for new damage. You know, remember, sellers on the way out aren't as careful and cautious with the property as when they were moving in or while they were living there. So it does happen. I have been to final walkthroughs where there are drag marks on the floor, broken windows, dings in the wall. You know, they didn't care as much. They're moving big furniture out and they're trying to get out in a hurry. They got, you know, they either got their money or their money's on the way and they're trying to get up and they're trying to get out. So you're looking for things like that. And you're also looking to see if certain things that are supposed to be part of the sale are still there. So that refrigerator that you checked the box for, that the seller signed and said, yes, it's part of the deal, is that still there? Okay, I've experienced it where the refrigerator's gone. So my maneuver there, or my approach to that, was I called the lender right away and I told them, buyer's very upset. They took the refrigerator. Listing agent is apologetic. They told the seller not to take it. They're going to try and get him to put it back. In the meanwhile, what did I do? Well, I asked the buyer, what do you want to do? You want to close and try and get it back later? Whatever you want to do. I'm not a lawyer. Talk to one. You may have to take them to small claim to get it back, or hopefully trust them and honor that they will put it back. Or we might be able to contact the lender and tell them not to fund the loan. So there's an important thing right there. I like to do my final verification or final walkthrough either the day before you sign loan docs or the day you sign loan docs, because either or gives you still enough time to pause the funding. The funding happens usually within 24 to 48 hours after you sign the loan docs. The funding, what that means is when you are sending your portion of the monies and the lender is wiring their portion of the monies to escrow for title to record. If you have that final walkthrough either before the loan doc signing or the day that you sign the loan docs, it should give you enough time to postpone that funding, which basically is dangling the carrot in front of the seller. Like, hey, you want your money? We are 2-3 days away from closing. Put the refrigerator back and I'll go ahead and green light the funding. Don't put the refrigerator back and I'm going to kind of sit here. And if you want to send me a notice to perform, you go ahead and do that. You know, I want what I want. I want it to be the way it's supposed to be. I don't know what happened here. There's some zings and zangs happening here. Oh, there's Bill right there. Okay, everyone understand that there? Very important. In a transaction, it's just as important to have leverage and the ability to hold the person on the other side accountable rather than losing your leverage and giving the other side all the leverage, all the juice, all the power. And there are ways to do that on either side. Okay, there's some kind of mysterious thing going on here with zigzags on my document here. Okay, anyways. Okay, everyone understand that for final verification?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Another thing I usually do here is I usually plug in on item 3L3, informational access to property. I usually put the same amount of days that I'm in escrow for. So if I'm saying that we want our escrow to be 30 days or less, possibly, I usually change this number from 17 to 30. Why do I do that? Because this right here, informational access to property, says that the buyer has the right to access the property for informational purposes. It's not a contingency. Basically, they have the right to go back to the property. I want it to be for the entire time, from the time we open escrow to the time we close escrow. But if you follow the contract, remember, we can do a final walkthrough 5 days prior to the close. But let's say our inspection contingency was 10 days, right? Let's say it was 10 days, and after 10 days, we're expected to have performed all of our inspections, have a termite company go in there, have a plumber go in there, have whoever physically go in there to look at the property. But let's say between day 11, after our 10-day inspection contingency, and day 25, there's a 15-day gap. There could be a 15-day gap. And what if the buyer wanted to go and measure for countertops, curtains, something, refrigerator, something like that? By leaving the 17 days in there, actually between day 17 and day 25, there'd be about a week of days where the seller, listing agent, could contractually deny the buyer going in. So I put 30 days there, and I'm basically saying, I want my buyer to have access, reasonable access. We're not going to just show up and say, let us in, but I'd like to be able to say, the buyer would like to go in tomorrow or go in the weekend and measure something, look at something, choose paint color, something. Some listing agents get weirded out about that. Their feeling about it is, uh-oh, buyers getting nervous, buyers second guessing, buyers, getting ready to back out, or there's a reason, they get a little paranoid. To me, I look at it more like, well, a couple of things. I don't want to dismay the buyer at all. I don't want to them lose their momentum, and them wanting to come back in, sometimes repeatedly, and they're measuring stuff, whatever, buyers get excited. They're already seeing themselves living there. To me, that's good momentum. And if they are thinking about backing out, I want to know sooner than later that they're going to back out. And for them to come to the final walkthrough, which the way I do things, they would more than likely have had all their contingencies released. But I just want them sooner than later to, if they're going to back out or try to back out, let's just get that over with. I don't want it to go so deep into the transaction that they cancel at the last minute. I have positioned my buyers several times to be able to do that. Listing agents don't always know how to block these loopholes or prompt or make the buyer fulfill their duties for releasing contingency. Some listing agents just don't have the intestinal fortitude to send notices to perform, or they don't put language in their counters up front that automatically remove these contingencies, and things end up sliding, and buyers agents end up, like I said, getting the leverage and taking over the transaction. So anyways, I usually put the amount of days that I plan, that we have for the escrow. That makes sense there, everyone?
Yep.
Okay. I'm still wondering what these mystery zigs and zags are here. I think somebody did that on, I think I may have accidentally put anyone and everyone share screen on here today. Okay. Now, right now, and even during that very difficult time for buyers market that we had a while back, I am not changing the contingency days here. I am leaving them the way they are, and I am letting my buyer's offer price do the talking. If a seller and a listing agent like that price, but they don't like the contingencies being the standard amount of days here, they're going to counter back and ask you to lower some of these. More than likely, they're going to ask you to lower the appraisal contingency. I'm sorry, the inspection contingency right here. That's probably going to go down from 17 to 10, sometimes even 7. A lot of agents don't still have a clue what the review of seller documents contingency is. That's basically when they hand over the disclosures to the buyer has yay many days to review. They have 17 days unless otherwise agreed. Same thing with loan and appraisal. I don't touch those days either. I know some agents will say, tell their buyer, oh, there goes my screen again. They'll tell their buyers, oh, if you want to be more competitive, you need to lower this dramatically, cut it in half, slash it, or waive it completely, which is an even worse idea. No, leave it alone, send it over, and see what the seller and the listing agent say. You don't know that if you'd left it alone, let's say they countered you back and didn't touch your loan contingency, they left it at 17 days. Let's say they came back and say, okay, we're going to bring that to 12 for the appraisal, and the inspection, we're knocking that down to 10. So what if your buyer's agent said, you know what, you want to be more competitive? We're going to knock this down, appraisal down to 10 or 7. We're going to knock down the inspection contingency to 7, not knowing that they were going to give you 12 and 10 right there. So I'm not going to let the buyer sell themselves short right off the bat. I'm going to let the price do the talking. If they like the price enough, let them come back and give us an idea where they'd like these contingencies to be. Make sense, everyone? And for goodness sake, even if your lender says no loan contingency, no appraisal contingency, I mean, unless you have that absolutely rock solid in writing and your buyer understands the repercussion of their loan being denied, even though they're told that it's 100% guaranteed to approve, I would want to see some rock solid proof in writing from the lender, someone to be held accountable if that didn't happen, if things didn't work out. Because once you go there and release your contingency, if something happens in relation to that contingency, something goes wrong with the loan, something goes wrong with the appraisal, you've got no way out. And what's at risk? Right here. Your buyer's escrow deposit is at risk. Okay. Another important item here And I know I'm going through the gamut here, but as many times as I will talk about this, like I am tonight in detail, I will still get offers and things are missed. That's okay. You really have to be out there writing offers, going through transactions and really have the experience for it to really start setting in and clicking. So I will repeat things and repeat it and repeat it. And believe me, once you get in a transaction, you will be thankful that it was repeated to you and things start to make sense. Now you're starting to see all the talk put into action and say, oh, okay, that's why we were always talking about this over and over again, because this could have messed things up if I didn't remember that, or if I wasn't guided on checking this box or putting this language. Okay, so on item 3, let me go back to something real quick here. Where did it go? Okay, real quick, sorry, before I lost train of thought. Time of possession. I don't talk about this a whole lot, but I helped an agent a little while back, and I admit the listing agent on the other side was not they were an unsavory character there. The escrow was recorded at like 10 or 11 in the morning. The property was vacant. The agent, in my opinion, was lazy and didn't want to put the key back in the lockbox because whatever they were doing, and they came back and said, well, we don't have to give you the key until 6 p.m. because that's what it says here, time of possession upon notice of recordation, or 6 p.m. and then you can go ahead and change the number. So what I usually do is put a reasonable time frame in here. I usually put 1 or 2 p.m. because at that point, that agent was serious. They did not get back there and put the key in the lockbox until just about 6 p.m. And it was a Friday. So the buyer lost literally that whole extra half of the day that they could have started moving stuff in because they were waiting and waiting and waiting for the agent to put the key back in. That makes sense, everyone?
Wait,
Yeah.
Frank,
Yeah.
I don't understand how he could say that. He had till 6 p.m. because it says or in all caps, and then there's a box next to it. So it would seem to me that it's unless you check that box or you
Well,
put
no,
it.
he countered it at 6 p.m. So
Oh, okay.
I would put a number in there, a fair number, because he knew that it could close earlier, like 10 or 11. So I put a reasonable amount. Usually if something's going to record, it's going to record anywhere from mid-morning to early afternoon. So
Okay.
he caught that and countered it. He countered it out. I guess it's his standard procedure. You know, if I had put a reasonable number, he probably would have left it alone.
Got you. Okay.
But the agent too was in a hurry. The buyer's agent, they relayed it to me as if they understood it, and they didn't. They should have countered it back and put something less. Yeah, but it says upon notice of recordation right there. But you're going to get agents regardless. This agent, it doesn't matter if we had agreed that rock solid, this is what it is. They were going to say, well, I can't get down there. What do you want me to do? You know, so I'm usually checking ahead of time when I see that we funded and we're coming to close or the buyer signed the loan docs. I'm already talking ahead of time about transfer of keys. How are we going to do this? Can you remember to put them back in the Supra or put them in a combo lockbox? I will be glad to go down there and put my own combo lockbox there. I'll give you the combo if you would just please put them in there. I'm not going to give them to my buyer. And there's another thing. Never, ever, ever, for whatever reason in the world, ever give your buyer the keys ahead of time until you get absolute in writing notification from escrow that you are closed. I had a friend a while back, and his buyer was in a hurry buying a property in Long Beach. And there was this big, it looked like a shed, almost like another unit almost, but it was pretty run down, beat down. And the buyer just he couldn't move fast enough on knocking that thing down, basically. Okay, so as it goes, my friend tells me that the buyer just kept saying, he was antsy. Oh, you know, are we closed yet? Are we closed? Are we closed? So my associate friend called escrow 3 or 4 times, and escrow must have just gotten, you know, just fed up with him and said, yeah, we're closed. Title says we're closed. I just didn't send the notification yet because usually I wait for the written notification from them, but whatever the circumstances were. So he goes and he tells his buyer, and at that time we were using combo lock boxes a lot, not the Supra as much. Another thing, I always recommend the Supra. In most occasions, except for if you need to have keys there for maintenance or something like that, or, you know, transfer of keys, but that's putting the box on very, very late in the game. Well, long story short, the buyer had rented this little mini Caterpillar thing. It's almost like a mini tractor with a big claw on it thing, and went in there and leveled that thing because the agent told him it was closed. Escrow called my buddy an hour later and says, oh, we had a problem with the recording and it got pulled. And this was on a Friday. So it wasn't going to actually close until Monday. But there was kind of some suspense because the buyer just went in there and started leveling this thing. What if the whole transaction just came apart entirely and didn't officially close? He just went ahead and knocked someone else's property down, basically. Okay. I just wanted to get back to that because I don't talk about that enough, but that can be important too, right there. You got to be real clear on when are we going to transfer keys? How are we going to transfer keys? So you don't get caught up in one of those moments, even though it says it right here. You'll get these agents that say, well, I can't be there until later, whatever. I didn't know. We should have talked about it ahead of time, arranged it ahead of time, and so forth. Okay, so back to this. So what I usually do is I check this box right here and I put this one phrase, all items noted on MLS. You could check the boxes of the items that you want included with the transaction. I would do both. Check the boxes, but I always put this language there. Why do I do that? Because a while back, one of the agents in my group, their buyer got accepted on a home in Downey. And I hadn't been to the property yet, but I did go to the inspection. That would be the first time I'm seeing the property. And when I get there, everybody walks into the home and they walk into the living room, and literally everybody, there was the husband and wife, the parents, of course, the agent, one of the sisters, whatever, and they all walk in there. And the husband and wife, they just stop in their tracks and they're staring at the wall. And they turn around, they look at their parents and they're like, it's gone. And I'm just, you know, like, what's going on? The fireplace, it's gone. And I'm saying, there was a fireplace? How could it be gone? So I walk outside and I'm looking for the stack, the chimney stack. You know, obviously when you have a fireplace, if it's a real fireplace, the heat's got to go up and out. There was nothing there. So I pull up the MLS, and I already knew the answer in my head. I pull up the MLS, and once you know it, there's a picture of what looks like a fireplace, but it was one of those mock fireplace heaters. And it looked pretty convincingly, it looked like it was like there, like built in. And that's what they thought also. And on the MLS, it did say cozy fireplace, but it was gone. So we called the agent, and right away, she was a little flustered, like, oh my goodness, he took it. Well, it turns out that the sellers of that property were engaged, and then I guess at some point disengaged after they bought that property, and wanted to sell and go their separate ways. And the fireplace and a couple of other things where basically the fiance, the guy, the fella, he wanted to take it with him, and the lady said, no, leave it there, whatever, let's get rid of this property. Well, he ended up taking it out. But see, the thing is that there was no box or anything checked that said fireplace, because they didn't know it was a plug and play heater type of fireplace. Although it did mention it on the MLS in the description. Now you would think, well, okay, they mentioned it, so it's false advertising to not have it there. Well, it might be false advertising in a small claims court, but it's not enforceable truly to stop the sale or make them put it back because it says it on the MLS. Contractually, it's not enforceable. The only thing that you can make them put back or pause the transaction is something that was asked for in writing and signed by buyer and seller. That makes sense?
Yep.
You would think that no, they put it in the description. Well, yeah, but I talked to Car Legal 2-3 times about this, and each one of them had the same answer. They said you could probably get them in a small claim court because that's a possession type thing, but it's not attached, and there's no box checked saying that you wanted it. So you might get them for false advertising, but it's not contractually. It's not a contractual obligation. But here's the thing. The agent on the other side didn't call Car, I guess, and didn't know any better. So I tested them. And I called them up again. And I told them, yeah, we really need to get this back, because now I'm looking on the MLS and it says right here, you even put it in writing, cozy fireplace, and you're not delivering. And that was enough to, let's concern them. And they went to work and ended up getting it put back. If they would have called Car and checked for themselves, even then, I'm sure they wouldn't want their client to get dragged into a small claims court. But if there's something there that you really want, whether it's a refrigerator, a stove, a chandelier, or whatever it is, or if you put this, you want to check that, but I would also check this box and put anything noted on the MLS. Because then we could have made that enforceable, because they noted it in the description. And if we put all items noted on MLS, then now it makes the seller obligated to have it as part of the purchase. Make sense, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What I see quite a bit also, and I get it, everyone, a lot of us are newer agents here, and there's a lot to think about, finding property, taking care of clients, showing property, figuring out how much you're going to write on that offer, writing the offer, submitting the offer, hoping you get accepted. There are a lot of things to think about. So we overlook some things. One thing I see overlooked quite a bit here, is it the biggest deal in the world? No, but I want to be thorough on this, is under 3Q1, we ask that the seller provide the buyer with a natural hazard zone disclosure. It's a report that basically shows natural hazards, whether it's flood zones, fire zones, earthquake, fault lines. Let me see this. There we go. It basically states the third-party report that tells you if the home is in a flood zone, a high fire zone, an earthquake fault zone, any potential hazards over an airport flight path, and so forth. Now, this one doesn't look like it has the graph. Some of them will have the photos of the fault lines and all that stuff too. But basically, we're asking the seller to provide that report, third-party report. Let's put this up here. There we go. Sometimes I see no boxes checked here and it's just left completely alone. So remember on item 3Q1, check the seller box. You're asking the seller to provide that because it's a disclosure from seller to buyer. And I usually check this box too. I want a thorough environmental, everything covered in that report. It's usually going to be everything anyways, but let's be thorough ourselves and check that box. And then I put seller's choice. The sellers can be a little, listing agents can be a little looser on which company is going to provide it. If you have a particular company that you like Disclosure Source or First American or something like that, you can request it. Listing agents usually don't care, but I just usually put seller's choice. I'm trying to get accepted, so I'm not trying to be too overbearing, pushy, demanding upfront, because believe it or not, you'll be on the other side of it sometimes. You'll be a listing agent and you'll see offers come across the table and buyer's agents are asking for a lot, getting a little pushy, getting a little demanding, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, they're already like this and we're not even in a transaction with them yet. Imagine when we're in a transaction, how demanding they're going to be. Sometimes it could be a red flag. Okay, so I try not to demand so much up front. I just want what's right and best for my client. Yes, but seller's choice, not a problem. We got to remember to check these boxes too. Q4, 5, 6. Okay, this is for smoke alarms, carbon detectors, water heaters strapped and all that. These are basic California health and safety items here. If you're missing smoke detectors or carbon detectors or water heater straps, and you're getting a loan that's financed, I mean, you're getting a loan at all, that could come up. The appraiser could go out there and call out and put a whole transaction on pause because one smoke detector is missing from a bedroom. So let's check that box and ask that the seller take care of that, be obligated to do that, and put it on them if it isn't, okay? This one, sometimes agents get a little confused here. Q5 and Q6. Government required point of sale inspections and reports. Now, one of the agents I coach, actually, they've been in the business going 17 years. And today we had this very conversation because they have a property listed in escrow and it's got an HOA. And this particular HOA and city have required inspections. What is a required inspection? Exactly as it sounds. Some cities have a policy where if real estate is being sold, transferred, that you have to apply for, pay, and have a city inspector come and see the property for any violations. Not every city has that. Some do. And then city to city, they may have their policy on top of it. Some may say, in order for you to sell, you have to remediate anything that's in violation, or else you can't close the escrow. Others might be looser on it and say, hey, whoever, seller, buyer, somebody's got to take care of this within 6 months to a year, or whatever it is, after we go in and point it out. Whether it's seller, whether it's buyer, but somebody's got to do it. Usually, cities that have that policy are going to have some kind of like affidavit where the buyer signs something saying, okay, I'm buying it. I understand the issues it has, and I'm taking responsibility for correcting those things after the fact. That's usually how things work out there. The city's not saying you can't sell it at points like that. They're just saying somebody's got to take care of these things within a certain amount of time after we go in there and point it out. Okay. That's what Q5 is. When you get a counter from a listing agent who's asking you to take an item out like this, where you know you've done the research and you know that city has that, I don't know if I would take the chance with my buyer and saying, yeah, we're going to go ahead and skip around the city and avoid the whole thing in order to get accepted. And it might sound like, well, who cares if we get accepted, by doing that, all I care about is getting accepted. Well, on top of getting accepted, that buyer needs to be really clear on accepting the fact that if ever in the future they do anything to that property with permit, get a new roof, windows, whatever it is, the inspector can come look at one thing that's being done legitimately and pop you for something that was out of compliance. And you, buyer, don't be mad at that seller because you agreed to it. You agreed to it, and now it's your responsibility. It's all on you. Why? Because you were just so eager to get accepted that you didn't give, a little bit of pushback and say, no, seller, we want this done and we want to know ahead of time. As long as we know ahead of time, we're okay with it. Well, now it's sprung on you and it's a problem. We had a hand up there. I think it was Sandy.
Yes, Frank.
Yes.
Oh no, it was by mistake. I was trying to mute myself and I pressed on the wrong thing.
Oh, okay. No worry. Okay, so be very cautious when you're out there shopping with your buyers and the cities that they're interested in. Just call the building and safety department or the planning department and ask them ahead of time. Hey, I got a buyer who's thinking about buying in whatever city, and I'm just calling to see if you have a pre-sale inspection requirement or any kind of required inspection when someone's selling a property, someone's buying a property. And I would call a couple of times because you never know if you're going to get the new person over the counter answering the phone and who knows, they're busy and they just say yes or no or whatever it is. You want at least some kind of consistency. You want to hear either 2 yeses from someone or 2 no's from someone to be sure. Okay. That doesn't mean you have to go and look at city records and all those things, which I usually do. But you at least want to know what their policy is ahead of time, because if you do write an offer, you want to know that by checking these boxes and possibly you being countered to delete these sections. Well, if you're being asked to delete that section in a city that has this required policy, that's a problem. It really is. It's up to your buyer whether they want to take that problem. And cities won't be happy either, because let's say that circumstance happens where they do catch you later on. They're going to basically probably also question, well, didn't you know that we had this inspection? And you can say you didn't, whatever, but it's really up to the buyer to do their due diligence. It's very important that they go and check these things ahead of time. Now, like I said, I will look into policies of cities and things that don't kind of add up to me about a property, but I will never start funneling guaranteed information to my buyer and say, here it is. I did all the research for you. Take it as fact. You don't have to lift a finger or do anything. No, I will tell them, look, things aren't adding up here. I want you to go to the city and see if you find out what I'm finding out. And I will put that in writing. And I want them to respond to it also. I want them to know that things are stressful. They're putting up a lot of money, but it's their responsibility to themselves to find out what they're buying, what issues they may have. If there are any concerns about things that don't look right, additions, any kind of upgrades, improvements, and they want to know if those things have been done correctly with permit or if there are violations, they need to do themselves a favor and check with the city also. Very, very important that you encourage them in writing constantly. Okay. Now, item Q6 is basically saying if they have this policy here, that you want the seller to correct those issues that come up. That may not always work. Like I said, there's some cities who, let's say they point out something that has to do with, I don't know, a covered patio in the back. And maybe the issue is that it has electric to it and the walls need to be opened up and make sure the wiring is correct and everything. And who knows, sometimes sellers will do things by licensed contractors and things are done right, but they just don't want to take the time or pay the extra money to have the permit for that work. So they cut a corner and they actually, hurt themselves in their value on the resale. Okay. But let's say that's the issue and the buyer feels, good, like, it's not a big deal. If anything, take care of it after the fact, maybe ask the seller for credit or something like that to take care of that after the fact. But just remember, the buyer needs to understand that if they accept that, they move forward with that, whatever that amount of credit, if it doesn't cover it after the fact, it's over. It's hard to go chasing a seller after the fact for something once you sign off on it. Right? Everyone understand this section right here? Because it does confuse. Okay, let's check the
So-
question.
Really quick, Frank, as far as the illegal additions, because I've been running into that a lot, so it's basically up to the buyer then to go themselves to the city. You don't do that for them. Right?
Well, when I see something's looking weird, I of course will ask the seller or the listing agent, do you know if there's a permit there or whatever? And usually those who have done a transaction, the agents have a duty. Usually most brokerages want you to do what's called an AVID, an agent visual inspection disclosure. And what it is where you're putting what you know about that property in writing, and you're supposed to be open, honest, truthful. What do you know about it? Okay? And you as a listing agent, if anything, you should divulge what you know. So if you know something's unpermitted, I will put it in my AVID because I want to cover myself that I let the other side know. Your sellers also, unless they're exempt, they're going to give a couple of disclosures. One of them is called a transfer disclosure statement. The other one, a seller property questionnaire. Now, these disclosures are the seller's opportunity to put in writing, hey, I did new countertops, I put new windows, I did this, I did that, without permit. Okay. Now, those are usually the telltale signs up front that it wasn't done with permit. I may leave it alone there because the seller's already telling you up front. But I will still tell my buyer, look, this is giving me a red flag here. I would still check with the city to find out if there's any more stuff that may not be permitted. Let's say and you'll see this a lot on the MLS, it'll say new roof. But then on the disclosures, they may not put exactly, that they did the roof without permit too. You check with the city. I encourage my buyer, check with the city if that's a concern of yours, because that's not an easy thing right there. You wouldn't want a city to say, after the fact, when you're getting the windows done, they come there to look at the windows and they pop you on the roof. And then when they go inspect that roof, they say, you know what, this roof is done entirely wrong. You're going to have to do it all over. That's not a cheap all over do-over. It's 20 grand easy, depending. So go down to the city, find out for yourself. Do you see anywhere in the documents where it's there's a roof permit for a new roof? No? Okay, now you as a buyer need to know that although it says it on the MLS, new roof, it doesn't say new roof with permit. New roof is going to be permitted. You're buying a home that has a new roof. They even have the receipts from the contractor, a professional roofing company that didn't pull the permit though, because they were trying to cut down on time and money or whatever. But you're buying a property with a roof that's not permitted. And you do understand that. And you understand that anytime in the future, that could get called out. I'm telling you, a lot of buyers, quite a few buyers will say, yeah, I'm fine with it. And others will be concerned. They want some kind of assurance. So maybe they want a roof cert, meaning where a professional roofing company will come out and look at that roof and certify that this roof was done right. Although with no permit, it was done right, and so on and so forth. They're not going to permit it. They're just going to tell you it's done right. That might bring some confidence to the buyer that, hey, even the professional roofer says it was done right. So if an inspector came down, they'd probably find the same thing, that it was done right. I probably have to pay for the permit. Who knows, maybe make a couple of adjustments here and there, but it's probably not going to be tear the whole thing down and start all over. So I do encourage the buyer to take a deep dive in that particular area for sure and find out things for themselves. I will clue them in usually from the the disclosures, like, hey, you notice it says this and this and this here, right? I'll point these things out crystal clear. If you want to go and check on those specific things on the city while you're doing your due diligence and checking for everything else to see if there are any outstanding violations or previous violations in the past on the property, which you should be doing the whole time while you're there, look into that too. That makes sense?
Yep.
That area right there alone is so overlooked. So overlooked. Agents just do not do a good job driving that topic home with their clients. And it's a gamble. It's a gamble that, remember, after a transaction is closed, it's rare for a seller to get mad at a buyer and want to come back and get something from them. But most lawsuits that end up in, if it gets to a high level of litigation, it's because a buyer is mad at a seller. And everybody, they're mad at the seller, they're mad at the listing agent, they're mad at their own agent. You got to protect yourself. You got to put things in writing and encourage them heavily to do their due diligence. Have a very good night, Misty. Hope we see you Wednesday. And we may have something live here at the office on Saturday. We'll let everyone know in the next 24 hours.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
So we got to drive that particular area home, like until you're blue in the face about it, because if something happens after the fact, you need with all confidence to know that you exhausted your efforts in, I don't want to say warning, but encouraging, recommending, suggesting that your buyer take action on behalf of themselves and look into things without question. Because remember, we're not contractors. I think oftentimes buyers feel like, well, you're an agent, you should know all of this stuff. You should know everything. You should be an expert. No. If you look at our disclosures, like our AVID, our agent visual inspection disclosure, it says it right there. We are only, we're agents, not only, but we are agents, we are realtors, and our duty is to give only an obvious and visible assessment of things, opinion of things. We're not contractors, we're not biologists, we're not engineers, none of that. We're pointing things out and asking you, if you don't find things yourself or your inspector point them out, we're asking you, if you're concerned about something, let's bring in the professional. If the inspector went under the home and says, I thought I saw a crack in the foundation, small one, but it's there, then let's bring in a foundation expert. We want the client to be happy. We want them to be satisfied. And of course, very important, after the fact, we want all accountability for those things taken off of our shoulders and put onto theirs. They're the buyer. They're the ones that are making the decision to buy based on as much information as we can give them so they can take that information and make an informed decision. Okay. I can't stress that part enough. Miguel, if you're going to bed, yes. We do have a YouTube channel with all the recordings on here. I'll go ahead and send you the link, my friend. Okay. Now here's one area I got a little bit of a gripe about here. Ooh. Now this completely disappeared right there, right? Okay. Hold on. All right, Miguel, have a good one. Item number Q7 under escrow fees. Now I've had this conversation with 2 or 3 car attorneys. It gives you the option for escrow fees for the buyer to take care of it, the seller to take care of it, both to take care of it, or each pay their own. I really don't see a whole lot of a difference between both and each pay their own. It should probably just say each pay their own. But in any case, I usually check each pay their own. Now there are some, here we go, my camera's wigging again. action. All right, give me just a second here. I would be on the Mac, everyone, but I've got some kind of Wi-Fi issue going on with my Mac here when I come to the office. Okay, so I standardly check each pay their own and basically say, seller, you take care of your side of things. Buyers taking care of their side of things. Sometimes escrows will have deals for listing agents where they charge the seller less and they charge the buyer, not necessarily more, but whatever market price is. But in this case, I'm just saying, hey, look, we'll take care of our side. You take care of your side. Even if the seller is crediting the buyer the money, it's not necessarily the seller taking care of it. So you wouldn't necessarily check that box, because what you're saying is that the money that the seller is giving to me, I'm using it to take care of my own side. And then, of course, I put seller's choice of escrow here. It's not an easy task to ask a listing agent to let you on the buyer side choose the escrow. It's standard procedure that listing agents choose the escrow. Is it out of possibility? No. But, you know, listing agents just feel more comfortable using companies that they know and had previous experience with. Same thing here on title. We usually let seller choose title, although it could be really any title. Some can get faster questions or issues resolved, though. Some of the bigger companies and listing agents aren't opposed to you having title, which kind of makes sense because a title insurance policy is something that's going to run with the property even after the close of escrow. So sometimes you can ask for it, and sometimes sellers will say, no, we want all the choice of the services, or sometimes they'll say, that's fine. We have escrow, you can have title, not a problem. But it's standard to ask the seller to take care of that. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. It's 9:30. I'm actually going to do a hard stop there for questions, and then we're going to call it an evening, because Daddy Frank here has got to do his corporate taxes. Got to finish them. Questions, please. Questions. Got a room full of super smart people here. Yes. Let's see. Okay. Somebody's
Hey,
laughing.
Frank, did they, I don't know if it's in the sheets, did they take out that buyer thing saying about their commission part, or is it still like there?
No,
Because I haven't done the new one yet.
it's where'd it go? It's there. We're just not using it because of that lawsuit from Department of Justice. It basically was countered and thrown out. But I don't know. We'll see what kind of angle they come with to try and go around things. So for now, it's there, but we're not really using it. Item 3G3. I'm not going to go into super detail what it is.
No,
but
that's fine. I was just curious. That's a long, situation going on, but thank you for the update.
But basically, it was going to put things, from what I understand it was going to put buyer's agents in the position where they were going to have their buyers figure out a way to pay the buyer's agent's commission, when it's standard that the seller pays for the listing and the buy side commission. I know. Didn't happen though. Could have, but didn't. And that's still in there. I don't know if they're going to take it out. I think they're going to leave it there just in case. So. Okay. All righty. No questions for me? Great picture, Caesar. Look at that. Great action photo.
Thank you.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, so remember, just a reminder, this Wednesday at 12 p.m. at the Long Beach office, we are having Dina, title person, coming in to talk about lead generation through her, thanks Maricela, through her, one of her applications from Fidelity Title to show you how to smart farm, or basically work smarter, not harder. And then I'll know by tomorrow if we're going to have a Saturday here talking about some cool stuff. I won't say anything yet, but I'll let everyone know if we're going to have it here this Saturday. If we do, it's probably going to be 10:30 or so. And for those of you who don't have WhatsApp, get a WhatsApp account. It's free. And go ahead and message me, and I can add you to our WhatsApp group, chat group, just so that I'm making sure that all the notifications of all the trainings, everything's getting to you, because I think some folks, for some reason, my emails are going to their spam or not coming through at all. So if you don't have a WhatsApp, get a WhatsApp and then message me, or go on the WhatsApp and reach out to me, and we'll go ahead and get you in the group. All righty. All right. Oh, yeah, let me text you the number here. Or message you the number.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Good night.
To all. There we go. All right, everyone. Have a fantastic night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Frank. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Frank. Good night.